1 Timothy chapter 5 verses 1 through 16. Attitude of the minister and care for widows. In chapter 5, the apostle addresses various difficult situations that may have been present in the church at that time, and in so doing, help today's church deal with similar problems. Do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, younger men as brothers. In verses 1 and 2 of this chapter, Paul tempers this instruction by reminding Timothy of the attitude he should have when encouraging others. Younger men are not to be rough with older men, but appeal to them as they will appeal to their fathers. Younger men also are not to be despised because they are younger, but treated as younger brothers. Older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, with all purity. The same kind of balanced approach is to be used for older and younger women when it is necessary to admonish or encourage them as well. In all purity does not refer to sexual purity, but to the way Timothy admonishes all groups of people, young or old, men or women. In the following verses 3 through 8, Paul gives instructions about care of widows by the family. Honor widows who are really widows. Honor in the sense of respecting as genuine for the purpose of assisting those widows who are true widows, those women who, through the loss of their husband, have been left alone, in need, and thus vulnerable. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show pity at home and to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. The general rule is that the immediate family should care for their widows. Doing this is a form of a spiritual exercise that is pleasing to God and a way to show love and gratitude toward parents. Now she who is really a widow and left alone, trusts in God and continues in supplications and prayer night and day. But she who lives in pleasure is dead while she lives. Paul says that there was a responsibility for both the family and the church to help widows, but not all widows qualified for this assistance. The woman who called out to God for help and was faithful despite her desperate circumstances was to be favored over the one who used her freedom from marriage to abandon God and return to a worldly lifestyle. And these things command, that they may be blameless. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Timothy is to teach these two principles concerning widows and their families. Widows need to remain faithful to God, conduct themselves in all purity, and rely on the Lord for help. Families need to remember that to neglect to help their own parents and children deny the faith in doing so. Being a widow does not excuse one from being faithful, and being a faithful Christian means you care for your family members who are in need. In following verses 9 through 16, Paul gives instructions about care of widows by the church. Do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man, well reported for good works, if she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work. Many scholars believe that there was a benevolence list containing the names of widows that the church helped on a regular basis. In verses 9 and 10, Paul lays out the qualifications for a widow in the church to be taken into the number. She must be widow and at least 60 years old, the wife of one man. In other words, she was a faithful wife. She had a reputation for doing good and serving others. She brought up her own children, not delegating this task to others. She was hospitable, especially towards Christians, and she was known to be benevolent towards others in distress. But refused the younger widows, for when they began to grow wanton against Christ, they desired to marry. having condemnation because they have cast off their first faith. And besides, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but also gossips and busybodies, saying things which they ought not. Therefore I desire that the younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house, give no opportunity to the adversary, to speak reproachfully. For some have already turned aside after Satan. In these verses, we might get some insight as to why Paul had to write about this subject in the first place. There may have been some women who claimed the church benevolence whose only qualification was widowhood, but who were not living the Christian life. Paul was clear about who should not be put on the list for regular assistance and summarizes his instructions by saying that he wanted young widows to remarry rather than be placed on the benevolence list. If any believing man or woman has widows, let them relieve them, and do not let the church be burned, that it may relieve those who are really widows. Finally, Paul speaks to women who for some reason may themselves be responsible for widows. He repeats the same general principle. If the widow in question is a true widow in need, as described in previous verses, the younger widow needs to take care for her and not put aside this responsibility because she herself might be widowed. Attitude of the minister and care for widows. If able, we are to help our parents no matter what our status is in life. In this way, the church can concentrate on those widows who truly need help and can only count on the church for assistance. This is all for now. I hope you join us in our next video, where Paul will instruct Timothy concerning the way he should deal with church leaders who cause trouble, and offer general guidelines for Christian bondservants. Thank you for your time. May God richly bless you.